So, and welcome to another video on my channel. So I'm gonna switch it up, and we're not doing a whole makeup vid. I'm not gonna bring you through like a normal like vlog about what's going on with me in my life or like anything like that. We're gonna do a project, but I will bring you in on one of my favorite series. So I've been a big fan of the Kingdom Hearts series for years, and I literally just finished recapping and catching up just a whole overall breakdown. And I wanted to give a little bit of commentary. So please be warned, there are spoilers. I'm going to talk about a lot of topics that I just like breezed through, and I'm just going to try to keep it concise to like less than 5 minutes, so I'm not going on like a whole just overbearing tell a lot when I'm not trying to tell that much type of breakdown. But alright, so I'm gonna go into the basics. So I have been catching up on the whole breakdown of how everything started from the beginning. Now, in the beginning, the Master of Masters gives his task to his set apprentices, and Luxu being the main one that gets the biggest task of taking the Master's box and hiding it, and then on top of that, he's given the Master's Keyblade that also contains the Master's Eye to see how the future events throughout the series will take place. And Luxu's main task is to pass on the Keyblade over and over again to his next apprentice, so the Keyblade will continue to carry on, and he will essentially be able to continue to watch the story unfold throughout it by having his eye placed in the Keyblade. Now, the craziest part is, now this is just, I'm gonna like speed through the whole storyline because I'm not gonna bring you through the whole recap. If you want like a recap video, you can comment and I'll give one. But I'm gonna skip through the whole breakdown of Kingdom Hearts 3 because after you get caught up on the whole storyline that unfolded after, based off of this set task that he sent his apprentices to do, his apprentices essentially set the Keyblade War in place by forming their separate factions and then eventually turning on each other because of the prophecy that the Master of Masters set out, which was set to make them believe that one would turn on them, when in reality, in the Kingdom Hearts Key series, it's broken down that the apprentice union leader that actually would turn on the ones within the group actually happened to be the separate faction of people that were assigned to survive thanks to the task that he set his apprentice Ava out for. Now, Ava's task, separate from Luxu's task and for any of the others that were set out to form the factions and raise these strong Keyblade wielders and do all their own individual set tasks that were key to how their story development was set in place for the storyline's overall development throughout the series. It was really interesting, but to say the least, Ava's task was to train a bunch of Keyblade wielders that would, instead of joining factions and in the end being involved in the Keyblade War, her Keyblade wielders will be trained to use their powers for good, essentially, just to like not go overly in depth. Like, you'd have to literally watch the breakdown and to watch all the freaking cutscenes and the movies to literally just see how it's all just made to come to life and bring the story to that in-depth level. But essentially, she saves her Keyblade wielders, and by the end of it, after the Keyblade War takes place and all the other apprentices, warriors, turn on each other, and after like a long series of battles, they take each other out, Ava's Keyblade wielders are brought to a dataverse, and in there, the prophecy takes place in which the new leaders that Ava was assigned to find and train to replace her other members. Unbeknownst to her, it will be weak because they will pass, essentially, which is explained later when they return. But again, spoilers. But that's a spoiler of the story I'm going to tell you. If you already know the storyline, then it shouldn't be a spoiler. And if you listen to the spoiler part in the beginning, you should be like ready. There are spoilers if you don't know. So after doing so, trains the replacements for her members, and they're sent to the dataverse to survive and to be in a world that is essentially, as the master set forth, to be a world where they don't have to remember or think about the Keyblade War because they didn't take place in the environment in which it was set forth, and they didn't see it. They don't really know. They know of it, but they didn't really have to be a part of it. So they're essentially able to live other lives and, you know, continue to do so, have families and live and create other Keyblade wielders. But the Dataverse is set with the only small amount of people that are able to leave throughout these pods that will take them from the Dataverse, which will break down as like, if you don't know about it and you haven't analyzed the whole Kingdom Hearts Key storyline and watched anything on that, it's explained through the whole Kingdom Hearts 2 with Roxas and going to the Split Traverse Town and the storylines before that of how Roxas came to be and how everything took place and how Roxas ended up there without his memory due to the fact that he rebelled against the organization and then ended up there after during these series of battles and ended up battling Riku and some of the Ys and Riku bring him to the Dataverse version of Traverse Town. And he lives out there for this cool summer experience until being brought to the point where he wakes up and realizes, oh my gosh, I'm connected to a whole other person, and oh my gosh, I have like a whole past that I'm not even realizing, and then it gets really in depth. And then later in part 3 and in Birth by Sleep, you get the whole breakdown of like Roxas looks exactly like Ventus, but it's connected to Sora's heart, and it's just how did everything come to be. And then you get the whole further storyline breakdowns of everything that's going on with Sora, and throughout all of the games and their storyline breakdowns, you get to know that Sora's heart, and it explained in part 3 how it was melded with another outside of Ventus and Roxas. You would think that it's like Vanitas or something like that, but Vanitas lacked that part of its heart and it wouldn't be connected to him essentially, but it's explained throughout the game that in a way it was still, and it's like Ventus, Sora, and Vanitas were like a trifecta created from the moment in which their hearts separated. And here's the main part that like will throw you off, because I'm gonna go like a little in depth into the whole Xigbar perspective and the whole Xigbar, Lucio, and the whole ending to part 3 that really just brought that all together. The Master of Master and the timeline breakdown that is thrown completely out of whack due to the fact that Roxas, not even Roxas, Ventus, okay, so Ventus is a main character in the whole Kingdom Hearts Key storyline that will throw you out of the loop, because Ventus is consumed by the darkness in the point in which Ava is recruiting her said warriors and union leaders that are going to lead the faction in the Dataverse to like go to that point in which they are going to separate themselves from what is going on and flee to safety and continue to let the story unfold outside of the battle that would destroy the world, essentially, what they are led to believe from how the Master set everything in motion for them to believe, or from how the events unfolded due to their actions based off of the little bit of information that the Master told them each that they took, and in turn created the situation that led towards the storyline actually becoming a real version of that prophecy, because he told enough to keep them like on their toes, but overall they set everything in motion in the following moments after, which was extremely interesting and brings you all the way up to the newest storyline, which is awesome. So after Ventus interferes with that whole moment, Ventus goes to meet up with one of Alex's apprentices, and in the moment that happens, yeah, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to literally go watch the videos to get like everybody's name and breakdown and see the cutscenes, because I don't even want to tell you too much. I want to stick to the main task because I'm already going over my time limit, so I'm gonna stick to the basics. Don't mind me if I'm not saying everybody's name or explaining the scene that you'll find out, but I will tell you the storyline of the game so that you can get the breakdown and see the gameplay and the clips that I'm talking about, because it's freaking awesome and you have to literally binge the storyline explanations of the series because it's so interesting. So after that, Ventus is meeting with her, and the darkness consumes him, and it literally attacks Ava's freaking apprentice. And in that moment, Ventus takes the book that is only passed down because each apprentice was given a copy of the predictions, future events to come, that the Master of Masters gave to each of the students, aside from Lucio, because Lucio wouldn't need one, because Lucio's task was to set the events in motion to continue to carry on and pop up and reunite them all one day, unbeknownst to Lucio, because he was only told to keep the Keyblade and pass it on and hide the box and keep it safe and let the other events of the others who were given the predictions to unfold, which they took to set a lot in motion, which Luciu stays present throughout the whole series, surviving up until part 3. Which brings me to the whole point of, so Ventus was around during the moments where the apprentices were still alive and keeping what's going on, is still training people and wants to take them to the Dataverse. While in the Dataverse, the one who ended up betraying them, of course, is Ventus, who wasn't supposed to be there. The dark has already consumed him, but he honestly believed in his mind that Abba set for him to be one of the apprentices to go in there and to be a leader. And they ended up breaking it to him and telling him the truth of everything that was going on. And he started remembering. He started saying everything he remembered, and then there was a whole breakdown. And then it was like, oh my gosh. And then they ended up fighting the darknesses in the same area that I told you where there were the only 5 pods to get them all out of there and back to the actual verse, and then they have to send the pods back from the actual verse after doing all this other stuff. Programming mode, which is where Brain comes in, and they end up fighting a being of darkness, which was one of the 13 darknesses that they were essentially trapped in that world by the Master of Masters' plan to keep from escaping back into the world after. And the essential way that you could do that would be by trapping 6 of the darknesses and keeping them there and split throughout the warriors and apprentices and trying to keep them out of there. But there was only a way to do it for a select few amount, and while they're in the split verse, the darknesses begin to take form, and Ventus and the other apprentices, the new League of Apprentices, the Obvious Apprentices, then take on the Being of Darkness and end up getting assistance, and by the end of it, they take it out. Ventus is knocked out, other members are knocked out, and Ventus is sent to the real world where other members are also sent. Brain follows. Ventus is then sent to the future along with other members that should be sent to the future that are to be remembered at that time point to bring them back to reality and who they are as an individual, because they can only send their heart to the future. So an individual who believes in, who remembers them and has spoken in their heart and all this other cute, this lovey-dovey, but very specific type of breakdown is the only way to bring them back and reassemble them as an individual. They have to have a vessel and somebody who remembers them so that they have memories to come back to that will create them as to who the person that they are and once were, and a vessel in which their heart will go to. So the part that will throw you off is Ventus ends up being the same exact Ventus. Like for the rest of them, I'm guessing they ended up being different people. Another member ends up making their way out by the end of the Kingdom Hearts Key series, which ends up being a character that plays into the storyline again in Kingdom Hearts 3, which brings the whole, of course, they keep it all canon, which is something to love from this series, because every once in a while there are the storylines that are just to be cute to just experience because it's special, but for this one they're all canon to the original storyline and the character development throughout. So that storyline character Sora ends up meeting later, which is another thing that'll throw you off because that one looks the exact same way also, and they all are in the split verse after. And even though you would think, well, if they got sent to the future by this pod that was able to bring them from the digital verse to reality and then to the future, that would make sense. It seems like it's that type of game series where they'll add that in there. But during the process of escaping the Dataverse, they run into Luciu, which is the Master of Masters apprentice. Now, here's the part that'll throw you off. Along with Ventus popping up looking exactly like Ventus, and Luciu still being a character that's still present in the future, you're made to believe by what Luciu says as the whole statement of, I've gone through many forms to get to this point, and it's did you go through many forms to get to that point, or did you all just kind of escape the Dataverse and then come back into the world? The Master of Masters is probably Master freaking Xehanort at a younger age. And then they say how Master Xehanort sent the messages to himself in the past to set the events in motion in the future, and then you get the whole clip of young Xehanort, and it's like, oh, young Xehanort, and then like they do the storylines in Kingdom Hearts Key where it's believed where Xemnas or young Xehanort's baby was passed on and then like found on an island and then raised by like an older version of like Xehanort that ends up dying while watching over him, and it just leads to the storyline factor of maybe the time traveling by my heart that will create the semblance of me to live again storyline that they use to kind of rematerialize themselves in the future after escaping the pod, because those are the same set standards for them to come back to being a individual being after escaping the dataverse and going to the future. If the Master of Masters knew that, it would be something that he was probably focusing on and trying to do for years to ensure that, aside from him sending an eye and the Keyblade to the future, he also sent himself to just kind of see and make sure that all the events that he wanted to set in motion actually took place and that he was actually a part of it, with Lucio and all of his other apprentices being brought back into that full in-depth level of the storyline by the end of it. And Lucio is like, along with the Xehanort, brought into the storyline from the beginning. Now Lucio's like literally beginning, and Xehanort is like beginning of the storyline as we know it, in which events unfold. Future self setting events in motion with his past selves to create all the events that led up to Kingdom Hearts 3 and Replica Revolution and different forms of Xehanort. We have the past Xehanort, the present Xehanort, we have Xemnas, which is nobody essentially, but what's a person? We have Ansem Xehanort, which was like Xehanort's form was nobody, so we have his nobody, his heartless, which was the Ansem form, Master Xehanort, young Xehanort. It's foretold that Xigbar is supposed to be one of those. Now for Xigbar, in the way that it unfolds that Xigbar is just strictly Lucio, I honestly would believe that from Birth by Sleep, that whole same Xigbar with the same demeanor but a little bit more evil is probably just him trying to that character of like, I'm not Lucio and we're just gonna like create some drama and I'm with the organization, I'm gonna turn on you and I'm gonna take you down, and then later on as the storyline develops he's still helping like the other side, because that was the mindset that he had behind it, because when each of them are defeated they return to their original form of who they were. No matter how many times Xigbar is defeated, aka Lucio, you may get the whole darkness view, but you also get the same thing with Master Xehanort, and Master Xehanort was as himself. Like, if you defeat Master Xehanort, you don't defeat him and it's like, oh, you defeated a Heartless or you defeated a nobody. No, you defeated that actual person, which has been like the main storyline throughout, where you're not fighting actual people or actual beings, you're fighting the Heartless and the nobodies. And when it comes to fighting people like Xigbar and Master Xehanort, you're fighting people who would give you that perception of them being controlled by darkness or having the powers of a nobody, but in reality, they just use the powers of darkness while the others use the power of light, which doesn't really show that much of a big effect on them while they're fighting, unless it's a magical moment, aside from people who fight with the power of darkness, where it always is seen as an aura around them and a power that can be used, and when they're mad or like feeling any type of emotion, the darkness consumes them even more and fuels the power. So it kind of brings a better storyline up. Is Lucio, aka is Xigbar, actually a different person, was in a different form, or is Xigbar just Lucio? And did the Master of Masters main plan need Xigbar to know that if, in the same way that Xehanort separated his hearts and you end up with the past forms guided by the older version and the nobody and the heartless of Xehanort, it kind of makes sense that Lucia would probably do the exact same thing to make sure that even if there was a time skip and it made sense for Ventus to be the exact same age and everything in that current storyline because he was sent to the future and he was able to materialize himself again thanks to Lucia or one of the other wielders, like throughout them all being sent to a different timelines, they would essentially be able to be reunited with the version of them that essentially would have their memories and live on and be a new version of them, and having the memories of the others if they were all simultaneously brought back at like ending points to each's life as they like added, created, and shaped the verse up until the points where there were shifts. I mean, it would essentially allow for Ventus to eventually be brought back at some point and materialize to be himself in a living life again, but there was a whole storyline breakdown in which where he was still wrapped up in the cloth in the future, where it's not like he like rematerialized and his rope passed on to take on a vessel or anything like that. Like, and if they were just sent to the future, it's like what the heck was going on, and how far was he sent to the future? Were they all sent to the future as their like present selves? It was just really crazy. But back to the easy levels of Lucio, and I'm at 5%, you guys, so get ready. I'm gonna like breeze through this. So for Lucio, he pops back up at the end of part 3 and he meets up with all of the other apprentices that are now brought back to life after it's supposed to be a long series of years. And as I said, we're still trying to figure out like Xigbar Lucio, like he's in birth by sleep and then he pops up later. Did he just age and that's why his hair is gray and there's no connection to Master Xehanort except for that's the Master of Master and he's still loyal to him and still like at this point it's been so many years Master of Master and I realized what you meant by darkness will prevail and that I should just be here to freaking watch it. Is that his eye that's in the damn Keyblade? Was Xigbar the Master of Master and like the Xehanorts are like the student? It's like when you listen to that clip where Xigbar's talking to another organization member and it's in the final mix of part 2, that special cutscene, and Xigbar's like doing his thing. Xigbar sounds exactly like the Master of Masters in all honesty. The Master of Master would be one of the only characters we'd ever see wearing that cloak and hoodie that's original from the beginning of the storyline and timeline, missing a damn eye. And it's like, the old man said he'd give me his Keyblade one day, and it's like, did you go back and tell yourself you were going to give yourself the damn Keyblade? And that's like mini you that goes off to set all these things in motion later. And you're just like doing it over and over again with yourself, and then when you bring the others back at the end of this, you like took on the form of Lucio, like, I don't know, it's like really confusing, but to the overall Lucio thing, it is like the exact same guy. He listens and he's like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard that name in so long. It's been like multiple forms now at this point, but we're back. And then he's like, I'm gonna fill you in on everything that's going on. And then Lucio pops up again, or who we're supposed to believe is Lucio, with the box that he was supposed to keep hidden and the Keyblade that he was supposed to hang on to. So essentially, Lucio did do his job, and he obviously kept the Keyblade in circulation, and he obviously held the box well because in part 3 there, like, it's like he pretends that he's looking for the box when he knows where the damn box is, but he can't reveal that because that will reveal that he was one of the old ones from the story if it happened to get out that Lucio was one of the ones that hid the box in the storyline. And if Maleficent was looking for it because she was the other party looking for it with Pete, if she would know that, and if she like kind of connected all the dots before the ending and everything unfolded and they got rid of the Xehanorts, it kind of would have been bad and it would have been like waste of a damn storyline. So I don't know. It was really interesting. The only thing that Lucio did that Lucio was not instructed to do, Lucio was instructed to literally take the box and hide it and pass on the Keyblade. Now the thing that Lucio did that defied the Master, and everybody's gonna tell you all the different reasons of how and what Lucio did to defy the Master. Lucio was not supposed to get involved in what was going on. Lucio was just supposed to watch it unfold. Now, as I told you, Lucio pops up in the Dataverse after the whole Keyblade war takes place, and this is where Lucio reinserts himself into the situation and takes Ventus out of the freaking dataverse and brings Ventus back into the real world, containing the darkness, and then sends that into the future, which sets everything in motion. And then after that, they've already had the Keyblade War and have destroyed the planet. Their warriors of light have, instead of saving and protecting the light, have been taking the light from the planets. And by the end of the war, the world is destroyed and in shambles. Luxu pops back up, and instead of staying out of it again, gets involved and sets even more things in motion, which in Luxu's absence throughout the series, and different parts in which he popped up when Luxu was supposed to stay out of it and let everything just unfold, and to just keep the box safe and keep the sword safe so the master could watch through his eye in the Keyblade. Luxu essentially sets a lot of things in motion that he was not supposed to be involved in. It was supposed to just be to keep the warriors going, learning, thinking that one which would betray them, and then it would be betrayal, the war, the breakdown, everything Luxu did as instructed, has everything safe, and at some point Luxu would unlock the box and open it. But with Luxu having evidence of knowing what is inside the box, based off of the evidence of what the Master of Masters told him, and nothing beyond that, Luxu wouldn't open the box until Luxu felt the time was right, but Luxu was never instructed to open the box. Luxu was instructed to never open the box, in which you're reminded by part 3 when Luxu does everything but open said box, but we'll tell you a story about it and everything that unfolded because of it and what the Master told him now in front of the box, which is interesting. But go ahead and check out the storyline. If you want to hear another video on my breakdown, let me know. Aside from that, I hope you enjoyed the storyline and continue to watch out on it because knowing Kingdom Hearts is going to get even more saucy, and you're going to love it.